The Cancer Control Agency has confirmed New Zealand is behind Australia when it comes to life-saving drugs. The agency, Te Aho o Te Kahu, has released its latest report this morning, revealing what many of us already know. It's identified 20 different gaps across 9 different cancer types. Cancer Control Agency Chief Executive Diana Sarfati joins us now. Diana, thanks for being with us this morning. 3 of these gaps we're talking about are actually medicines that can cure your cancer. Are you less likely to survive cancer if you're in New Zealand than if you're in Australia?
Yeah, Australia actually has the top cancer survival rates anywhere in the world, and New Zealand is slightly below that. And so those 3 medicines, those are all used in conjunction with surgery. So surgery is the main mechanism for curing those cancers. And what those medicines do is increase the chances of surviving. So for example, in order to be considered clinically significant in the context of the study that we did, the medicine would increase the likelihood of surviving so that 3% more patients would be alive at 3 years than in the absence of the medicine.
So this is surely just not good enough, that in New Zealand you can have less chance of survival than Australia because there are medicines that just aren't funded.
Yeah, so those differences in survival between the 2 countries are quite complicated. So cancer medicines is one part of the picture, but there's a whole lot of issues that we need to be looking at. So things like making sure that people are diagnosed earlier, making sure people have access to the best cancer surgeries, the radiation oncology, as well as cancer medicines. So it's part of a broader context, if you like.
The Breast Cancer Foundation and the Aotearoa Coalition are disappointed in actually the numbers that have been given in this report, saying that it identifies just 1 breast cancer drug as needed but not funded, when in fact there's 18 breast cancer drugs that are funded in Australia and not here. Why weren't more included?
So the way that we did this is we looked at medicine indication pairs. So one particular medicine might be used for, say, 2 or 3 different cancer types, but we looked at each of those uses separately. So because it might be that a medicine is publicly available for one cancer, but not for the other 2. So for a start, we looked at that. We then looked at whether or not the gaps, any gaps that we identified were real gaps, because sometimes there are several medicines that can be used to fill a particular gap. And then we applied a tool which allowed us to identify those medicines that had clinical benefit. So that's that 3% more patients alive after 3 years that I was talking about. So we had 3 medicines in the curative space and then another 17 in the non-curative space. And we worked very closely with senior clinicians, both in New Zealand and internationally, when we were doing that work.
What we're talking about is curative is 3 that can help cure cancers and 17 which can extend your life. New Zealanders are excluded too from clinical trials, and in Australia they have been using a drug, or there have been trials of a drug that has helped with brain cancer, which could potentially help with breast cancer as well. Now that medicine is not available here, which means we can't be involved in the clinical trials. Should that have not been something that's also pertinent to this report?
Yeah, so that's also part of the picture. So sometimes if the next best alternative treatment is not available here, we can't be part of those trials. So the use of clinical trials is a sort of a separate issue, in that we want to see as many patients as possible involved in clinical trials. Occasionally that will happen where the comparison medicine is not available here, and that is an issue.
So for these 20 medicines, or 20 gaps, I know 2 actually have since been funded by Pharmac.
That's
but
right.
What kind of price are you putting on all of these medicines for Pharmac to say we're going to fund these and we'll be on par with Australia?
Yeah, and that's a very difficult question to answer, because Pharmac negotiates prices on medicines, and so we're unable to put a specific cost on these medicines. But I guess another point I would make is those 20 gaps, which are now 18 gaps, as you say, 2 have been funded, don't include medicines for blood cancers. So there are actually some additional gaps for blood cancers as well. And we know that at least another 7, up to another 14 or 15.
So the government has increased Pharmac funding by 25% over the past 4 years. Is that enough, or are we falling well short?
Again, this is a question of where we put investment. So what this report shows is that there is a really important gap in cancer medicines in New Zealand. So that's information that goes to government and to Pharmac, and then they need to prioritise that against all the other things that they need to consider in relation to health.
Cancer Control Agency Te Aho o Te Kahu Chief Executive Diana Sarfati. Diana, thanks for being with us.